In one of the most expensive homes in Nairobi, a man sits alone in the dark. No meetings, no calls, no visitors. For 5 months, billionaire Thabo Ndlovu has not spoken a single word. His staff thinks he's lost. His ex-wife thinks he's vulnerable. Everyone around him has started acting like he's already dead. But Thabo can hear everything, he can see everything, and he's been keeping count. What the housekeeper does when she thinks no one is watching, what she whispers, what she refuses to take, none of it goes unnoticed. Thabo Ndlovu was not born into wealth. He was born into red dirt and corrugated tin in a small village outside Eldoret, where the rain came sideways and the roads turned to rivers every March. His father was a truck driver who disappeared for weeks at a time and returned smelling of diesel and silence. His mother sold vegetables at the roadside and prayed every night for a son who would become something. Thabo became something. By the time he was 35, he owned his first mine. By 40, he had expanded into real estate across East Africa, hotels in Mombasa, office towers in Dar es Salaam, shopping complexes in Kampala. By 50, the name Ndlovu was spoken in boardrooms and government halls with a mixture of admiration and envy. Forbes featured him twice. Presidents returned his calls. But wealth has a way of building walls while pretending to open doors. His marriage to Celine Mabaso had started with fire. She was a lawyer from Durban, brilliant, sharp-tongued, breathtakingly beautiful. They met at a conference in Cape Town, married within a year, and for a brief shining moment, Thabo believed he had everything. But Celine wanted presence. She wanted warmth. She wanted a man who came home before midnight and asked about her day. What she got was a man who built empires and forgot birthdays. "You love your buildings more than you love me," she told him once, standing in the doorway of their bedroom with her arms crossed. Thabo had looked up from his laptop. "Everything I build is for us." "No," she said quietly, "everything you build is for you. I'm just the woman who lives inside it." The divorce was clean. Celine took what was legally hers, a generous settlement, the apartment in Johannesburg, and a silence that felt heavier than any argument. Thabo signed the papers without fighting. He told himself it was dignity. In truth, it was numbness. He had already begun the slow process of turning to stone. The only thing that kept him human was Thabo. His son was nothing like him, and that was the miracle. Where Thabo was hard, Thabo was gentle. Where Thabo saw numbers and margins, Thabo saw people. He had chosen medicine, not the prestigious surgical specialty Thabo had quietly hoped for, but community health. He wanted to work in villages like the one his father came from. He wanted to treat children who couldn't afford a clinic. "You could run the foundation," Thabo offered once over dinner. "Proper funding, a real office. You'd reach more people that way." Thabo smiled, that wide, easy smile that reminded Thabo painfully of his own mother. "Papa, you can't scale compassion. You have to be in the room. You have to hold the child's hand." Thabo didn't understand, but he loved the boy for saying it. They had dinner every Thursday. It was the one appointment Thabo never canceled. No board meeting, no investor call, no government function could touch Thursday evenings. They ate at the long mahogany table in the Nairobi mansion, just the two of them. And for those few hours, Thabo remembered what it felt like to be a father instead of a CEO. It was a Thursday when everything ended. The charity gala had run late. Thabo had been the keynote speaker, a young doctor talking about healthcare access in rural Kenya, his voice steady and passionate under the chandeliers. Thabo sat in the back row watching his son command the room and felt something rare and fragile rise in his chest. Pride. Pure, uncomplicated pride. "Let me drive you home," Thabo said afterward in the parking lot. "Papa, I can take a taxi. You look exhausted." "I'm fine. Get in." The rain had started during the speech and hadn't stopped. Nairobi's streets were slick and dark, the streetlights reflecting off wet tarmac like scattered coins. Thabo gripped the steering wheel. His eyes were heavy. He had been awake since 4 in the morning for a call with investors in London, and the day had stretched on without mercy. Thabo was talking about a patient, a young girl in Kisumu with a heart condition, how they were trying to raise funds for her surgery. His voice was warm and animated. Thabo was listening. He was. But his eyelids were dragging, and the rain was loud against the windshield, and the road ahead blurred for just a moment. Just a moment. The light was red. Thabo didn't see it, or maybe he saw it, and his body didn't respond fast enough. The details would blur later, the screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal, the way the world spun sideways and then stopped. When Thabo opened his eyes, the windshield was shattered, the airbag had deployed and was deflating against his chest like a dying breath. Rain poured in through the broken glass. His hands were shaking. There was blood, but it wasn't his. Thabo. His son was in the passenger seat. His head was tilted at an angle that no living person's head should tilt. His eyes were half open. His mouth was slightly parted, as though he had been in the middle of a word. Maybe the name of that girl in Kisumu, maybe a joke, maybe just Papa. Thabo. Thabo, look at me. But Thabo was already gone. He had died on impact. The doctors would confirm it later in sterile language that meant nothing. Thabo would hear the words and understand them intellectually and reject them entirely with every other part of his being. He sat in that car for 11 minutes before the ambulance arrived. 11 minutes in the rain with his dead son, holding a hand that was still warm, whispering things that no one else would ever hear. The man who walked out of that hospital 2 days later was not Thabo Ndlovu. He looked the same, tall, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples. But something behind his eyes had switched off. Like a building where every light goes dark at once, and from the outside you can still see the shape of it, but you know no one is home. He went back to the mansion. He sat down. And he didn't get up again. The funeral was held on a Monday, under a sky so blue it felt like an insult. Over 400 people came, business leaders, politicians, doctors from Thabo's hospital, village elders from Eldoret who remembered Thabo as a barefoot boy. They filled the cemetery in dark suits and white handkerchiefs, their faces arranged in that careful mask of public grief, solemn enough to be respectful, composed enough to be seen. Thabo stood at the front in a black suit that hung on him like it belonged to someone else. He didn't speak. The eulogy had been written. Patrick Mutua had helped draft it. But when the moment came, Thabo simply stood at the podium, looked at the coffin, and walked back to his seat. Patrick stepped in. He read the words with a steady voice, though his hands trembled against the paper. He spoke of Thabo's kindness, his vision for rural health, his laugh that could fill a room. But every word seemed to land on Thabo like a stone, pressing him further into himself. Celine was there. She sat 3 rows back, in a black dress and dark glasses, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. She had flown in from Johannesburg the day before. She approached Thabo after the burial, reaching for his arm. "Thabo, I'm so sorry. He was my son too." Thabo looked at her hand on his sleeve. He said nothing. After a long moment, he turned and walked to the waiting car. He didn't look back. That was the last time Thabo Ndlovu spoke to anyone voluntarily for months. In the weeks that followed, the mansion became a tomb. Thabo moved between his bedroom and the living room like a sleepwalker. He sat in the leather armchair by the window, the one that faced the garden Thabo used to walk through on Thursday evenings. And he stayed there, sometimes for hours, sometimes until the staff found him in the same position the next morning. Dr. Nia Okello came twice a week. She checked his vitals, adjusted his medication, tried to coax words out of him. He responded to nothing. His eyes were open but vacant, fixed on some middle distance that only he could see. "He's experiencing severe depressive withdrawal," Dr. Okello told Patrick over the phone. "He's physically healthy enough, but psychologically, he's retreating. If this continues much longer, I'll need to recommend inpatient care." Patrick tried to visit. He came every few days, sat across from Thabo, talked about the business, about old memories, about anything. Thabo never responded. After a while, Duncan Kibaki, the head of security, began making it harder for Patrick to get through. "Mr. Ndlovu is resting," Duncan would say at the gate, his voice polite but final. "Doctor's orders, no visitors today." Patrick accepted it at first. He had no reason to distrust Duncan, not yet. Inside the house, something was shifting. It was slow, like water finding cracks in a foundation. The staff had been respectful in the beginning, hushed voices, careful steps, meals prepared and left untouched on silver trays. But as the weeks stretched into months and Thabo remained a ghost in his own home, the reverence began to rot. Chef Solomon Adeyemi was the first to test the boundaries. He started inflating the grocery bills, small amounts at first, then bolder. A receipt for premium beef that was actually cheap cuts. A wine order that never arrived but was fully paid for. He told himself it was harmless. The man had billions. He wouldn't notice. He couldn't notice. The gardener began showing up 3 days a week instead of 5, then 2, then whenever he felt like it. The hedges grew wild. Leaves piled in the fountain. One of the junior housekeepers started taking small items, a silver picture frame, a decorative vase from the guest room. Things no one would miss. Duncan watched all of this and said nothing. His silence wasn't neglect, it was strategy. The more the house fell apart, the more control he had. He was the gatekeeper. He decided who came in and who stayed out. And lately, he had been having long phone calls behind the security office door, his voice low and careful. In the middle of all this decay, there was Grace. Grace Wanjiru arrived every morning at 6:30. She entered through the service door, changed into her uniform, and began her work. She cleaned rooms that no one used. She polished surfaces that no one touched. She prepared Thabo's tray with the same care every single day. Warm tea, a light meal, a glass of water with lemon, a folded napkin. She didn't know if he ate. Most days, the tray came back untouched. But she kept preparing it. Sometimes, when she brought the tray to the living room, she would pause by his chair. She would look at this large, silent man staring at nothing, and something in her chest would ache. She didn't see a billionaire. She saw someone who had been hollowed out by grief, and it reminded her of how her own father had looked in his final months, present in body, absent in everything else. "Good morning, Mr. Ndlovu," she would say softly. "Your tea is here. It's a nice day outside." He never answered. She never stopped speaking. 3 months after Thabo's funeral, the Ndlovu mansion had become 2 different places depending on who you asked. From the outside, it was still magnificent. White walls behind iron gates, manicured from the street view. The kind of property that made people slow their cars just to look. But inside, it was unraveling, slowly, quietly. Like a suit that still looks fine until you notice the threads coming loose at every seam. Duncan Kibaki ran the house now, not officially. No one had given him the title. But power doesn't always need a title. It just needs a vacuum. And Thabo's silence had created the largest vacuum any of them had ever seen. Duncan controlled the gate. He controlled the schedule. He decided which deliveries came in, which calls went through, and who was allowed past the front door. When Patrick Mutua called, Duncan always had an excuse. Mr. Ndlovu had a difficult night. The doctor advised no visitors this week. I'll pass along the message. The messages were never passed along. Chef Solomon had grown bolder. The grocery budget, which had once been carefully managed, now bled money like an open wound. Solomon ordered for 12 when there were 6 in the house. He bought imported ingredients that never reached the kitchen. He ran a quiet side business selling premium cuts and bottles of wine to a restaurant owner in Westlands. Every week he pocketed a little more. "The man doesn't eat anyway," Solomon muttered to himself one evening, slipping an envelope of cash into his jacket. "What difference does it make?" The junior housekeeper, a young woman named Faith, had stopped cleaning the upper floor entirely. She spent most of her shifts on her phone in the laundry room, emerging only when she heard footsteps. She had taken 3 items from the guest bedrooms in the last month alone: a silver photo frame, a small crystal clock, a pair of gold cufflinks from Thabo's dresser. She told herself she deserved them, compensation for working in a house that felt like a morgue. And through all of this, Grace Wanjiru worked. She arrived at 6:30, she left at 5. In between, she cleaned every room assigned to her with the same attention she had given on her first day. She mopped floors that were already clean. She dusted shelves no one looked at. She organized closets, washed linens, scrubbed bathrooms until they gleamed. Not because anyone checked, no one did, but because that was the standard she held for herself. Her routine with Thabo never changed. Every morning the tray. Every morning the quiet greeting. "Good morning, Mr. Ndlovu, your tea is here." And then she would go about her work, moving through the house like someone tending a garden in winter, knowing that nothing was blooming but refusing to stop watering. What no one at the mansion knew, what Grace never spoke about, was what waited for her when she went home. Home was a 2-room apartment in Umoja, on the east side of Nairobi. The paint was peeling, the plumbing groaned every morning like an old man getting out of bed. The single window in the bedroom faced a concrete wall, but it was clean. Grace kept it spotless, the same way she kept everything, with quiet, stubborn dignity. Amani was 6. She had her mother's wide eyes and her grandmother's stubborn chin, and she laughed at things that weren't funny, which made them funny. She drew pictures constantly: animals, houses, clouds with faces. Her favorite subject was the big house, where her mother worked. Grace had described it to her once, and Amani had turned it into a castle in her drawings, with towers and flags and a garden full of butterflies. But Amani was sick. She had been diagnosed with a congenital heart defect at age 3, a condition that required surgery, the kind of surgery that cost more money than Grace would earn in 10 years. The doctors at Kenyatta National Hospital were clear. Without the operation, Amani's heart would continue to weaken. She would tire more easily, she would grow slower, and eventually, her small body would simply give out. Grace carried this knowledge the way she carried everything. Silently, with her back straight and her hands busy. She had applied to every medical charity she could find. She had written letters to churches, NGOs, hospitals abroad. Some never responded. Others sent polite rejections. One had put Amani on a waiting list so long it might as well have been a death sentence. Mama Rose, Grace's mother, watched Amani during the day. She was 61 with bad knees and a faith so fierce it could start fires. Every evening when Grace came home, Mama Rose would be sitting at the kitchen table with Amani, helping her color or teaching her songs. "How is she today?" Grace would ask, setting down her bag. "She's strong," Mama Rose would say, always the same answer: "God is watching." Grace would nod and kiss her daughter's forehead and start making dinner. And late at night, after Amani was asleep and Mama Rose had gone to bed, Grace would sit alone at that kitchen table, staring at medical bills she couldn't pay, doing math that never worked out, and praying with a desperation she never showed anyone. Every morning she got up and went back to the big house. She cleaned, she served. She spoke gently to a man who never answered, and she never once thought about taking what wasn't hers. It started with the tea. One morning, about 4 months after the accident, Grace set the tray down on the side table next to Thabo's armchair. She arranged it the way she always did: cup to the right, napkin folded underneath, lemon wedge on the saucer. She straightened up and looked at him. He was sitting in his usual position, eyes half closed, hands resting on the arms of the chair, still as stone. She had seen him like this 100 times. But something that morning made her pause. "Mr. Ndlovu," she said softly, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I made the tea a little stronger today, the way I noticed you used to like it, before." She waited. Nothing. She nodded to herself, smoothed her apron, and left the room. Thabo opened his eyes. He hadn't been asleep. He hadn't been asleep for weeks. Not truly. The medication Dr. Okello prescribed made him drowsy, heavy, slow. But his mind, buried under layers of grief and chemical fog, had begun to surface. Not fully, not in any way he could explain or control, but enough. Enough to hear. He had heard Solomon on the phone 2 days ago, laughing about the wine he'd sold. He had heard Faith's footsteps going into the guest room and coming out too quickly, something clinking in her pocket. He had heard Duncan's low voice behind the security office door, speaking to someone with a familiarity that didn't belong in a professional call. And he had heard Grace. Every single morning, every quiet greeting, every gentle word spoken to a man she believed couldn't hear her. Thabo looked at the tea. It was darker than usual, stronger, she had noticed. She had paid attention to how he liked it before the accident, a detail so small, so ordinary, that it shouldn't have meant anything. But in the emptiness that had become his life, it landed like a stone dropped into still water. He didn't drink the tea, not yet. But he didn't look away from it either. In the days that followed, Thabo began to watch, not with purpose at first, more like a man lying at the bottom of a well, slowly becoming aware of the light above. His eyes would track movement, his ears would catch fragments of conversation. He remained still in his chair, but behind that stillness, something was waking up. He watched Solomon prepare lunch one afternoon. The chef moved through the kitchen with the ease of a man who owned it. He tasted from pots without washing the spoon. He tucked a sealed package of meat into his personal bag by the back door. He whistled while he did it. Thabo's jaw tightened, just slightly. No one noticed. He watched Faith arrive late 3 days in a row. She signed in at the timesheet Duncan kept by the service entrance, writing times that didn't match reality. On the 3rd day, she walked past the living room without glancing in. She didn't know he could see her through the half-open door, checking her phone, scrolling through messages, killing time in a house where she was paid to work. And then there was Duncan. Duncan was careful. He never did anything overtly wrong in front of Thabo. He checked on him once a day. A brief visit, always with the same rehearsed concern. "Everything all right, sir? Doctor's coming tomorrow. You just rest." His voice was smooth, professional. But Thabo had built a billion-dollar empire reading people, and even through the fog of his grief, something about Duncan's tone was wrong, too controlled, too rehearsed, like a man who needed Thabo to stay exactly where he was. One evening, Thabo heard Duncan in the hallway outside the living room, speaking low into his phone. "No, he's the same. Hasn't moved, hasn't spoken. Yes, she can come whenever she's ready. I'll handle the staff. No, the lawyer hasn't been here in weeks. I made sure of that." The call ended. Duncan's footsteps faded down the corridor. Thabo sat in the darkness, his heart beating faster than it had in months. She can come whenever she's ready. Who was she? But it was Grace who kept pulling him back from the edge. Not with drama, not with grand gestures, with the smallest things. She came in one evening to collect the untouched dinner tray and found the room cold. Without a word, she went to the closet, pulled out a wool blanket and draped it over his legs. She tucked the edges gently, the way you would for a child. Then she stood there for a moment, and she spoke. "I know the world feels very dark right now, Mr. Ndlovu. I know that kind of darkness, but I believe God doesn't waste pain. I believe He's keeping you here for a reason." She paused. "My daughter, Amani, she drew you a picture. She calls you the sad man in the big house. She doesn't know your name, but she prays for you every night." Grace reached into her apron and placed a small folded drawing on the side table next to the tray. It was a crayon picture of a house with a sun above it and a man standing in the garden, smiling. "Good night, Mr. Ndlovu," She left. Thabo sat in the silence. His hand moved, slowly, painfully, and picked up the drawing. He held it in the dim light. A child's drawing, simple, bright. A tear slid down his cheek, the first one since the hospital. Something shifted in Thabo after that night. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden standing, no grand declaration. It was quieter than that, like a pilot light clicking on in a furnace that had gone cold. Small, almost invisible, but enough to produce heat. He started paying attention with intention. For weeks he had been absorbing fragments, overheard calls, stolen goods, lazy footsteps. But now he wanted to know, not just what was happening in his house, but who these people really were when they believed no one was watching. The first test was simple. Thabo waited until Grace had finished cleaning the living room and left. Then, slowly, painfully, he reached into the drawer of the side table beside him. Inside was a small leather pouch. He opened it, removed 5 10,000 shilling notes, and placed them on the coffee table. 50,000 shillings, fanned out, obvious. Then he closed his eyes and waited. Solomon found them first. He came in to collect the lunch tray, saw the bills on the table, and froze. He looked at Thabo, still, silent, unmoving. Solomon glanced at the doorway, empty. He licked his lips, picked up 3 of the 5 notes, folded them into his palm, and slid them into his back pocket. He left the other 2, not out of guilt, but calculation. Taking all 5 would be noticeable. 3 could be explained away, denied, forgotten. He picked up the tray and walked out whistling. Faith came in an hour later to dust the shelves. She spotted the remaining 2 notes almost immediately. She didn't even hesitate. She took both, tucked them into her bra, and kept dusting. Grace came in that evening to do her final check of the room. She saw nothing on the coffee table because there was nothing left to see. But the next morning, Thabo placed the test again. This time, he put 40,000 shillings on the kitchen counter, right next to where Grace prepared his morning tray. He had positioned himself in the hallway, door cracked open, watching. Grace walked in at 6:35. She set down her bag, washed her hands, and began preparing the tray. She reached for the kettle and stopped. The money was right there, next to the sugar bowl. She looked at it, she looked around. She picked up the notes, counted them carefully, and placed them in a neat stack on the far end of the counter. Then she took a piece of paper from the notepad by the fridge and wrote in careful handwriting, "Found on the counter, 40,000 Kenyan shillings, placed aside for safekeeping." She put the note on top of the money and went back to making tea. Thabo stood in the hallway, his hand gripping the doorframe. His chest felt tight, not from grief this time, but from something he couldn't name, something that burned behind his ribs like the first breath after nearly drowning. Over the next 2 weeks, the tests multiplied. He left an expensive watch on the bathroom sink, a Patek Philippe worth more than most people's annual salary. Duncan found it during his evening rounds. It disappeared. When Thabo checked later, it was gone. No note, no mention. He left a drawer in his study unlocked, the one containing a cash reserve he kept for emergencies. 80,000 shillings. Within 3 days, 30,000 was missing. The drawer showed signs of being carefully searched. Only Duncan and Solomon had access to that wing of the house. He left a gold bracelet on the laundry room shelf, right where Grace sorted the linens. It sat there for 4 days. On the 5th day, Grace brought it to the living room, placed it on the side table, and said, "Mr. Ndlovu, I found this in the laundry room. I didn't want it to get lost. I put it right here for you." She didn't know he had placed it there deliberately. She didn't know he was testing her. She simply did what she always did, the right thing, without audience, without expectation. Each test carved a line deeper into Thabo's understanding, the house he had built, the people he had employed, the security he had trusted. Almost all of it was rotten. They had watched him fall, and instead of holding him up, they had picked his pockets. But not Grace. Late one night, Thabo did something he hadn't done in months. He stood up from his chair. His legs were weak, shaking, uncertain, but they held. He walked slowly to the security office. Duncan was gone for the night. The room was locked, but Thabo knew the override code. He had designed the security system himself. Inside, he accessed the camera controls. Most of the interior cameras had been deactivated. Duncan's doing, no doubt. Thabo reactivated them. All of them. Every room, every hallway, every entrance. He routed the feeds to his personal tablet, the one that still sat in his bedside drawer, untouched since the accident. Then he walked back to his chair, sat down, and exhaled. For the first time in months, his mind was clear. Not healed, not whole, but clear. He had a purpose now, small and fragile, but real. He was going to find out exactly what was happening in his house, every lie, every theft, every whispered phone call, and he was going to watch Grace Wanjiru, not to catch her, but because watching her was the only thing that made him believe the world still had good in it. The black Mercedes arrived on a Tuesday morning, unannounced. Grace was in the kitchen preparing Thabo's tray when she heard the gate buzz. She glanced through the window and saw Duncan walking briskly across the courtyard, not with his usual slow authority, but with urgency. He opened the gate himself, something he never did. A woman stepped out of the car, tall, elegant, dark glasses. A man in a gray suit followed behind her, carrying a leather briefcase. Grace didn't know who the woman was, but something about the way Duncan greeted her, almost deferential, almost rehearsed, made her stomach tighten. Celine Ndlovu walked into the mansion like she still owned it. She removed her sunglasses in the foyer and looked around slowly, cataloging every detail. The dusty chandelier, the wilted flowers on the entry table that no one had replaced. The faint smell of a house that had stopped breathing. "Where is he?" she asked Duncan. "Living room, same as always." "And the doctor?" "Comes Tuesdays and Fridays. She'll be here this afternoon." Celine nodded. The man beside her, her lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Gerald Otieno, opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "We'll need 30 minutes with him," Gerald said, "preferably documented. If his condition is as described, we can file by the end of the month." Duncan glanced down the hallway. "He won't respond. He hasn't spoken in months." "That's exactly the point," Gerald said. Grace, carrying the morning tray toward the living room, turned the corner and nearly collided with Celine. The tray wobbled. Tea sloshed against the rim of the cup. I'm sorry, ma'am," Grace said, steadying the tray. Celine looked at her the way one looks at furniture. "Who are you?" "Grace, ma'am. I'm the housekeeper." Celine's eyes lingered for a moment, not with interest, but with the brief, dismissive assessment of someone cataloging the help. "Make sure the guest room is ready. I'll be staying a few days." She walked past without waiting for a response. Grace stood in the hallway, gripping the tray. Something cold settled in her chest. She didn't know what was happening, but every instinct she had was telling her something was wrong. In the living room, Celine sat across from Thabo. She crossed her legs. She studied him, his vacant stare, the blanket over his legs, the untouched tray from yesterday still sitting on the side table. Gerald stood behind her, pen in hand. "Thabo," Celine said. Her voice carried a softness that was almost convincing. "I came as soon as I heard how bad things had gotten. I'm worried about you." Silence. "The business is suffering. Your accounts need oversight. Patrick has been calling, but no one lets him in." She paused, tilting her head. "I want to help. I want to make sure you're taken care of." Thabo didn't move, didn't blink. But behind his stillness, something was coiling tight. He had heard Duncan's phone call weeks ago. She can come whenever she's ready. Now he understood. Celine glanced at Gerald. The lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Ndlovu, I'm Gerald Otieno. I represent your former wife's interests. Given your current medical condition, we believe it's prudent to establish a temporary conservatorship. someone to manage your financial and legal affairs while you recover. Mrs. Ndlovu has graciously volunteered to serve in that capacity." The words hung in the air like smoke. Thabo said nothing. His fingers, hidden beneath the blanket, pressed into the fabric of the armrest. Over the following days, Celine made herself at home. She toured the house. She asked Duncan for financial records. She opened drawers and closets, inventorying possessions with the efficiency of someone preparing an estate sale. Gerald made phone calls from the guest room, his voice low and steady. Grace watched all of it in silence. She continued her work, cleaning, preparing trays, maintaining the house, but her eyes were open now. She noticed how Duncan hovered around Celine, how they spoke in corners, how he handed her documents that Grace was certain didn't belong to him. One evening, Grace was collecting towels from the hallway closet near the guest room when she heard voices through the half-open door. "The filing has to happen before his lawyer gets access," Celine was saying. "Patrick Mutua is no fool. If he sees Thabo, he'll know something is off." Duncan's voice responded, "I've kept him out for months, but the doctor is getting suspicious." She asked about Patrick last visit. "Handle her or replace her?" "Celine, I didn't come all this way to lose. That man owes me years of my life. This is what I'm owed." Grace's hands tightened around the towels. Her heart was pounding. She moved away from the door as quietly as she could, walked down the hallway, and continued her work. She didn't tell anyone what she heard. She didn't know who to tell. But that night before she left, she stopped by Thabo's chair. He was motionless, eyes half closed. "Mr. Ndlovu," she whispered, "I don't know if you can hear me, but please, if there's any part of you still in there, be careful. Something doesn't feel right in this house." She left. Thabo opened his eyes in the dark. On the tablet hidden beneath his blanket, the screen glowed faintly. He had heard everything. The call came at 2 in the afternoon. Grace was polishing the dining room table when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She didn't usually answer during work. She kept it on silent, checked it only during her lunch break. But something made her look. The screen read, "Mama Rose." Her mother never called during the day. Never. "Mama? Grace, you need to come. Amani collapsed at school. They've taken her to Kenyatta. I'm on my way there now." The floor tilted. Grace gripped the edge of the table. What happened? She was playing. She just fell. She couldn't breathe, Grace. The teacher said her lips turned blue. Grace was already untying her apron. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't undo the knot. She pulled it over her head, grabbed her bag from the service room, and walked toward the front of the house. She passed Solomon in the kitchen. He didn't look up. She passed Faith in the hallway, scrolling through her phone. Neither of them noticed the terror on her face. She reached the hospital in 40 minutes. Mama Rose was in the waiting area, sitting very straight, with her hands clasped in her lap, the way she always sat when she was trying not to fall apart. "Where is she?" "They took her in. The doctor hasn't come out yet." Grace sat down. She pressed her palms together and held them against her mouth. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. She stared at the double doors leading to the emergency ward and willed them to open. An hour passed, then 2. When the doctor finally emerged, a young woman with tired eyes and a clipboard, Grace stood so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "Your daughter is stable," the doctor said. "But her heart rhythm was severely irregular. The defect is progressing faster than we anticipated. She needs the surgery, Mrs. Wanjiru, and she needs it soon. We're talking weeks, not months." "How much?" Grace's voice was barely a whisper. The doctor hesitated. "The procedure, including post-operative care, approximately 2.8 million shillings." The number landed like a physical blow. Grace nodded slowly, her face perfectly still, and thanked the doctor. She walked back to the waiting area. She sat next to Mama Rose, and she said nothing for a long time. 2.8 million. She earned 42,000 a month. Even if she saved every single shilling, no rent, no food, no transport, it would take her over 5 years. Amani didn't have 5 years, she had weeks. That night, Grace sat at her kitchen table after Mama Rose and Amani had gone to sleep. Amani had been discharged with new medication and strict instructions. She was asleep in her small bed, breathing softly, her coloring book still open on the pillow. Grace stared at the wall. Her mind was doing the thing it always did, running through options, calculating, searching for a door that wasn't there. The charities had said no. The hospital payment plan required a deposit she didn't have. The fundraising page she'd set up online had collected 12,000 shillings in 3 months. 12,000 out of 2.8 million. And then a thought crept in. Quiet, unwanted, persistent. The Ndlovu mansion was full of things, small things, valuable things, silver frames, crystal, jewelry left in drawers. There was cash. She had found it herself and left notes. 50,000 here, 40,000 there. Nobody counted it. Nobody checked. The man in the chair didn't move. Duncan didn't care. Solomon and Faith took things every week and nothing ever happened. One item, just one. No one would ever know. Grace pressed her hands flat against the table. She closed her eyes. She could feel the thought pulling at her, heavy and seductive, wrapping itself around her desperation. Amani's lips turned blue. She couldn't breathe. Just one thing. For your daughter. For her life. Grace sat there for a long time. The apartment was silent. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, a dog barked somewhere in the distance. Then she shook her head. Slowly. Firmly. She whispered to herself the words Mama Rose had said to her 1,000 times. What you do when no one is watching, that is who you are. She went to bed. She did not sleep. The next morning she arrived at the mansion at 6:30. She changed into her uniform. She prepared the tray. She carried it to the living room and set it down beside Thabo's chair. Good morning, Mr. Ndlovu. Your tea is here. Her voice was steady. But when she turned and walked to the laundry room, she closed the door behind her, pressed her back against it, and slid to the floor. She covered her face with her hands. And for the first time in the Ndlovu house, Grace Wanjiru cried. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't wail or scream. She cried the way people cry when they've been strong for too long. Silent, shaking, gasping into their own palms. God, please, she whispered between breaths. I've never asked for anything that wasn't mine. I've never taken what doesn't belong to me. But my baby, please, she's only 6. Please don't take her from me. In his bedroom, Thabo Ndlovu sat on the edge of his bed, tablet in hand. Camera feed. Laundry room. He saw Grace on the floor. He heard her prayer through the microphone he had reactivated. He put the tablet down. His hands were trembling. For months he had watched people take from him without conscience. Now he was watching a woman with every reason to steal choose to break instead. And something inside him broke too. That night, for the first time in 5 months, Thabo Ndlovu made a phone call. His fingers were stiff. The phone felt foreign in his hand, like an object from another life. He sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, the door locked, and dialed the only number he still trusted. Patrick Mutua answered on the second ring. Hello? Silence. Thabo opened his mouth. The words were somewhere deep inside him, buried under months of grief and disuse. His throat ached. Patrick. His voice was a rasp, barely recognizable. The silence on the other end lasted 3 full seconds. Thabo? Thabo, is that you? I need you to listen to me. Don't react. Don't call back on this number, and don't come to the house yet. Patrick's voice dropped low. The lawyer in him took over. Calm, precise. I'm listening. Celine is here. She's been here for days. She brought a lawyer. They're filing for conservatorship, trying to take control of everything. Duncan is helping her. He's been blocking you from seeing me. I knew it. I knew something was wrong. That man kept... Patrick, listen. I need you to prepare. I'm going to send you evidence. Camera footage, audio, everything, but you cannot move until I say. If Duncan finds out I'm aware, he'll accelerate. Celine will file before we're ready. How long have you been "Thabo, how long have you been awake?" Thabo closed his eyes. "Long enough." The call lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Thabo sat in the silence of his room and felt his heartbeat, really felt it, for the first time in months. It was rapid, unsteady, alive. The next morning, he resumed his position in the armchair, eyes half closed, blanket over his legs, the ghost of the Ndlovu mansion, right where everyone expected him to be. But beneath the blanket, the tablet was on, and in his mind, a plan was taking shape. He began small, careful movements that no one would notice. He transferred camera footage to a secure cloud drive Patrick could access. Hours of recordings, Solomon pocketing cash, Faith stealing from guest rooms, Duncan's private phone calls. He organized them by date, by person, by offense. He was building a case the way he had built his empire, brick by brick, with patience and precision. But the footage of Grace he kept separate. Not as evidence against her, there was nothing to incriminate. He kept it because watching her had become something else entirely, something he didn't fully understand yet. Her morning greetings, her prayers, the way she folded his blanket with both hands, pressing the edges flat with care that no one asked for. The drawing from Amani still sat on his side table. He hadn't moved it. He thought about what he had seen in the laundry room, Grace on the floor, praying for her daughter, refusing to steal even when stealing could save a life. That image lived behind his eyes now. It was the first thing he saw when he woke, and the last thing he thought about before sleep. 3 days after the phone call, Thabo began making other moves. He contacted his bank through a secure email and changed the authorization codes on his primary accounts, codes that Celine's lawyer would need for a conservatorship claim. He revoked Duncan's administrative access to the household financial systems. He did it quietly, through back channels, in ways that wouldn't trigger immediate alerts. Duncan noticed something on the 4th day. Small things. A login that failed. A security prompt that hadn't been there before. He stood in the hallway outside Thabo's room, frowning at his phone, and then looked at the closed door. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. He knocked. "Mr. Ndlovu? Everything all right in there, sir?" Silence. Duncan opened the door. Thabo was in bed, eyes closed, breathing slow. The tablet was hidden under the mattress. The phone was inside a pillowcase. Duncan studied him for a long moment. Then he closed the door and walked away. But the doubt didn't leave. That evening, Duncan met Celine in the guest room. Grace, passing through the hallway with fresh linens, heard the tension in their voices. Not the words, but the rhythm. Sharp, urgent. "Something's different," Duncan said. "I can't explain it. Small things are changing. Access codes, system settings. It's probably automatic, a security update." "No, someone changed them. Someone with admin access." Celine was quiet for a moment. "Then we move faster. Gerald says we can file the emergency petition this week. We don't need Thabo's cooperation. That's the entire point. We just need the medical assessment. Dr. Okello won't cooperate. She's careful. Then we get a second opinion. Gerald knows someone." Grace moved on, her footsteps silent on the carpeted floor. Her hands were steady, but inside, the uneasiness that had been growing for days solidified into something heavier. Something was going to happen. She could feel it the way you feel a storm coming, the pressure in the air, the stillness before the wind. That night, she stopped by Thabo's chair one final time. She looked at him, this man she had cared for in silence for months. She placed her hand gently on the blanket near his arm, not touching him, just close. "Whatever is coming, Mr. Ndlovu," she whispered, "I hope you're stronger than they think." Beneath the blanket, Thabo's hand moved. His fingers came to rest less than an inch from hers. Grace didn't see it. She turned and left. But Thabo felt it, the warmth where her hand had been, and he made a decision. No more watching. It was time to move. The meeting was called for a Friday morning. Duncan received the message first, A typed note slipped under the security office door, written on Thabo's personal stationery. It read, "Household meeting, 10 a.m. living room, all staff required, no exceptions." Duncan stared at the note. His jaw worked. He pulled out his phone and called Celine. "Did you do this?" "Do what?" "There's a meeting called, on his stationery." Silence, then, "That's impossible. He can't even—" "I know what he can't do, Celine. I'm looking at the note." "Then someone wrote it for him. The housekeeper? The doctor?" "I'll find out." "Either way, this changes the timeline. Gerald needs to be here. Bring the papers. If Thabo somehow shows signs of coherence, we frame it as a lucid episode. Temporary. It actually helps our case." "Fine. We'll be there at 10. By 9:45, the living room was full. Solomon stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, visibly nervous. Faith sat on the edge of a chair, picking at her nails. 2 other junior staff members hovered near the back. Duncan positioned himself by the main entrance, feet planted, arms behind his back, the posture of a man guarding a door. Celine arrived at 9:50 with Gerald Otieno. She wore a cream-colored dress. Gerald carried his briefcase. They sat on the long sofa across from Thabo's armchair, arranged like a tribunal. Grace stood near the hallway, uncertain. No one had told her what the meeting was about. She held her hands in front of her, fingers interlaced, watching the room fill with a tension she could almost taste. At exactly 10 o'clock, a door opened down the hallway. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed on the hardwood floor. Thabo Ndlovu walked into the living room. He was dressed, not in pajamas, not in the wrinkled clothes he'd worn for months. He wore a dark suit. His shirt was buttoned to the collar. His shoes were polished. He had shaved. His eyes, those eyes that had been vacant and half-closed for 5 months, were open, clear, burning. The room went silent. Solomon's mouth fell open. Faith stood up from her chair and then sat back down. Duncan's hand moved instinctively toward his pocket, then stopped. Celine's composure cracked for exactly 1 second. She recovered quickly, rearranging her face into a mask of concern. "Thabo, thank God, you're—" "Sit down, Celine." His voice was rough from months of disuse, but it carried the authority of a man who had commanded boardrooms for 30 years. Celine sat. Patrick Mutua entered behind Thabo. He carried a laptop and a stack of folders. He nodded to no one in particular and sat up at the side table. "Thank you all for coming," Thabo said. He stood at the center of the room. His legs trembled slightly, but he did not sit. "I called this meeting because there are things that need to be said and shown." He looked at Patrick. Patrick opened the laptop and turned the screen toward the room. The first video showed Solomon in the kitchen, pocketing cash from the grocery envelope. Then another. Solomon loading sealed packages of meat into his personal bag. Then the receipts, side by side, what Solomon claimed to have spent versus what was actually purchased. Solomon's face turned gray. "Mr. Ndlovu, I can explain." "You can't." Thabo's voice was quiet, final. "Sit down." The next video showed Faith entering the guest bedroom. The footage was clear, her hands reaching into a drawer, removing the crystal clock, slipping it into her bag. Then the cufflinks, then the photo frame. Faith began to cry. She didn't deny it, she just covered her face. Then came Duncan. The footage was longer. Phone calls, captured through reactivated audio systems. Duncan's voice, clear and damning. "She can come whenever she's ready. I'll handle the staff." His conversations with Celine about blocking Patrick, his systematic deactivation of security cameras, his quiet sale of access to journalists in the weeks after the accident. Duncan didn't move. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes darted toward the door. Patrick, anticipating this, spoke calmly. "2 officers from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations are waiting outside, Mr. Kibaki. I wouldn't recommend leaving." Celine stood. "This is absurd. I came here out of concern for—" "Sit down." Thabo turned to face her. His eyes held something beyond anger, a vast, exhausted disappointment. "I heard you, Celine. through the walls, through the cameras, every conversation, every plan. He owes me years of my life. That's what you said. Gerald Otieno opened his mouth. Patrick cut him off. The conservatorship petition is dead, Mr. Otieno. I've already filed a counter-motion with the court, supported by Dr. Okello's updated medical assessment confirming Mr. Ndlovu's full cognitive capacity. I've also filed a complaint with the Law Society regarding your involvement in what amounts to financial conspiracy against a vulnerable person. Gerald closed his briefcase. Then Thabo paused. The room was trembling with silence. He looked at Patrick and nodded. The final video began to play. Grace, on screen, morning after morning, preparing the tray, speaking softly, tucking the blanket, finding money and leaving notes, finding the bracelet and returning it. And then the laundry room. Grace on the floor, sobbing, praying for her daughter's life. Every person in the room watched. No one breathed. Thabo turned. His eyes found Grace, standing near the hallway, her hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Everyone in this house had a reason to take from me, Thabo said. His voice cracked. She had more reason than any of you, and she never did. The room stayed frozen for what felt like an eternity. Grace couldn't move. Her back was pressed against the hallway wall, her hand still covering her mouth. She had seen herself on that screen, her prayers, her tears, her most private moments laid bare in front of strangers. Part of her wanted to disappear. But Thabo was looking at her, and in his eyes she saw something she had never seen before from anyone in that house. Respect. The aftermath moved quickly. Duncan was escorted out by the 2 DCI officers Patrick had arranged. He went quietly. The fight had left him the moment the footage played. Solomon was terminated on the spot, given 15 minutes to collect his things. Faith left in tears, carrying nothing, saying nothing. The other junior staff were dismissed with severance and letters of reference. They had been negligent, but not criminal. Celine stood in the foyer, Gerald beside her, waiting for a car. She hadn't spoken since the footage ended. Her mask was gone now, not replaced by shame, but by the hollow expression of someone whose plan had collapsed so completely there was nothing left to perform. Thabo walked to the door. They looked at each other for a long time. You could have called, Thabo said quietly, after Lethabo died. You could have called and said you were sorry and meant it. That would have been enough. Celine opened her mouth, closed it. The car arrived. She left without a word. Gerald followed, briefcase clutched to his chest like a shield. Patrick handled the legal filings over the next week. The conservatorship petition was dismissed. Duncan was charged with fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Solomon faced charges for embezzlement. The household accounts were audited and restored. Patrick worked 18-hour days, fueled by the quiet fury of a man who had been kept from his oldest friend. But none of that was what mattered most. On the evening after the confrontation, after the police had gone and the lawyers had packed up and the house was emptier and quieter than it had ever been, Thabo found Grace in the kitchen. She was washing the tea set. Her movements were automatic, mechanical, the way a person works when their mind is somewhere far away. Grace. She turned. Her eyes were red. She still looked shaken, not afraid but exposed, vulnerable in a way she had never allowed herself to be at work. Mr. Ndlovu, I didn't know you were watching. I would never have... Those things I said, the prayers, they were private. I wasn't trying to... I know. He pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table. It was strange. He had eaten 1,000 meals in the formal dining room, but had never once sat in his own kitchen. Sit down, please. She hesitated. Then she dried her hands, pulled out a chair, and sat across from him. I need to tell you something, Thabo said. When my son died, I decided, not consciously, but somewhere deep, that the world was empty, that people were empty, that everything I'd built was just scaffolding around nothing. He paused. His hands were clasped on the table. I watched everyone in this house prove me right, one by one. They saw a broken man, and they took what they could. He looked at her. And then there was you. You talked to a man who never answered. You covered him with blankets. You returned money you desperately needed. You prayed for someone who had given you nothing. His voice thinned. Your daughter is sick. You can barely make rent. And you never took a single thing. Grace shook her head. That's not... Mr. Ndlovu, I wasn't being brave. I was just doing what's right. My mother taught me that your character is what you do in the dark. I couldn't take something that wasn't mine, not even for Amani. It would have broken something in me that I can't afford to lose. Thabo was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a folded document on the table. Patrick set this up today. It's a medical trust, fully funded, for Amani's surgery, and her care afterward, everything she needs. Grace stared at the paper. She didn't touch it. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. There's also a scholarship, Thabo continued, the Thabo Ndlovu Foundation, for children in underserved communities who need medical support. I want you to help me run it. Grace pressed her hands flat on the table. Tears fell onto the wood. She didn't wipe them away. Why me? Because my son spent his life believing that compassion can't be scaled, that you have to be in the room. You were in the room, Grace, every day, when no one else was. Grace broke. Not the quiet, controlled grief of the laundry room. This was different. This was relief. The kind that floods through you when a weight you've been carrying for so long finally lifts, and you realize how close you were to collapsing under it. Thabo sat with her. He didn't speak. He didn't try to comfort her with words. He simply stayed, present, human, awake, while she cried. 3 weeks later, Amani had her surgery at Nairobi Hospital. It lasted 6 hours. Grace sat in the waiting room with Mama Rose on one side and, to her quiet astonishment, Thabo Ndlovu on the other. He had driven himself. He sat with his hands on his knees, staring at the operating room doors with the same intensity he had once reserved for boardrooms and balance sheets. When the surgeon emerged and said the words "successful" and "full recovery expected," Mama Rose clasped her hands together and whispered a prayer. Grace collapsed into her mother's arms. Thabo stood. He walked to the window at the end of the corridor. Nairobi stretched out below, vast, loud, alive. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases. Amani's drawing, the big house, the sun. The man in the garden, smiling. He held it against the glass and looked at it for a long time. That Sunday, Thabo drove to Langata Cemetery. He walked the path to Lethabo's grave alone. The headstone was simple. Lethabo had never liked excess. Fresh flowers sat in a vase at its base. Patrick had been keeping them fresh for months, even when he couldn't reach Thabo. Thabo knelt. He placed his hand on the stone. "I met someone," he said quietly. "Not the way you're thinking. I met someone who reminded me that people are worth believing in. You always knew that. I didn't. But I'm learning." He stayed for an hour. When he left, the sun was low and golden, and the city hummed around him like a living thing. In his pocket, next to Amani's drawing, was a new sketch, one she had made from her hospital bed. It showed the same big house, the same garden. But this time, the man wasn't alone. He was holding a little girl's hand.